By now, much of the internet knows my thoughts on WeWork, or as I like to call it, what the fuck? Spoiler alert, it's a shitty business. But today we focus on a key piece of WeWork's recent prospectus, specifically Adam Neumann's decision to cash out of more than $700 million right before WeWork's IPO through stock sales and debt. This is an example of a secondary sale, a sale by an existing stockholder in a private company to someone else before that company goes public. Secondaries aren't unusual, but the size of Neumann's sale is. It's also the symptom of a larger phenomena, a shift in power between investors and operators. In the 90s, CEOs were considered necessary evils, crazy, eccentric, mostly men who had the vision to get a company started, but needed to be pushed out quickly in favor of gray-haired, older, more experienced executives who were charged with then scaling the company as they were the adults in the room. The power resided with capital or investors, and it was verboten for a founder to cash out of a company early, or specifically before the VCs managed to get their own liquidity. I did a secondary offering. I sold $1 million of my own stock to an investor in red envelope. Within 24 months, the company was going sideways, and I was forced to reinvest that full $1 million or be washed out by those same VCs. But in the late 90s and early 2000s, the power began to swing back toward founders. Entrepreneurs started to be seen as the secret sauce within companies. Why? Two reasons: Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Bill Gates was the first to prove that the same person could found a company and take it to $100 billion in value. Gates grew Microsoft to $600 billion over 14 years. The next CEO, Steve Ballmer, presided over a 30% decline in the firm's stock. Steve Jobs built Apple to $600 million in value over the company's first 5 years. However, he was then forced out in 1985 on the basis of being eccentric, stubborn, and mercurial. There are few things that indicate an information age jerk more than a CEO wearing a black turtleneck and telling people to find their passion. However, Jobs was in fact a genius, and none of the gray hairs that followed, Scully, Spindler, or Emilio, could grow the company. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company value grew from less than $1 a share to more than $50 a share. After a 10-year expansion, there's a lot of capital and few operators. It's just basic math. The NASDAQ has quadrupled, but the pool of talent, experienced or visionary operators has not kept pace. The void created here has been filled by fake prophets who've managed to coax a flock into thinking they are the next Jesus Christ of our economy, Steve Jobs, only to discover she wasn't letting FDA inspectors into the lab, or he's an asshole to his sub-minimum wage employees.
No one has ever seen this. You are the first one.
We started with $20.
The pendulum hasn't just rebalanced, it's swung in the complete opposite direction, tipping the scale squarely toward founders. VCs are jockeying to fund successful founders, coming up with creative term sheets that include secondary sales and two-class shareholder structures. Andreessen Horowitz was one of the pioneers of this movement. Founded in 2009, the firm modeled their fund off Hollywood talent agencies, where it's all about the talent. Andreessen Horowitz is famous for bidding up valuations to make rival firms uncomfortable and regularly value startups 50 to 100% higher than other competitors. Quick side note, SoftBank is now doing to Andreessen what Andreessen did to everybody else. In principle, secondary sales aren't necessarily a bad thing. Giving founders more liquidity is good for them and good for the economy, and secondary sales help suss out the value of a company. In addition, the public markets no longer offer the same liquidity for shareholders, as fewer companies are going public. The number of U.S. IPOs has declined 88% from 1996 to 2016. It also takes much longer for companies to get public. The average age of a company up for IPO increased from 3 to 8 years over the last 20 years. As a founder, I've sold shares into a secondary offering to get some liquidity and diversify. I get it. But Adam Neumann isn't selling a few $1 million here. He's selling $750 million. That's more than the annual budget for the FTC, the Peace Corps, and National Endowment for the Arts combined. It's also the equivalent of all of Celine Dion's Vegas sales over the past 16 years. It's also a terrible forward-looking indicator for the firm. We looked at other companies with founders who have sold this volume of shares pre-IPO, and it's not pretty. Some of these firms, Zynga, Groupon, are all firms that tanked post-IPO and had a founder that was dying to get out the door. There's a direct correlation between founders selling large portions of their stock pre-IPO and declining company performance post-IPO. In sum, secondary sales aren't inherently bad, but as the gross idolatry of innovators becomes not just stupid, but dangerous, secondary offerings are being abused. Adam Neumann has cashed out the value of Apple when Steve Jobs left the first time. Who can he thank for this? John Scully.